Wow, so cool. Please have a seat. Man, this is so exciting and just so fun to be here. I was pastor of Oasis for 35 years, and it's exciting to be here today. This brother here playing the bass has been on our worship team since 2008, I think he said. That's amazing. You guys got a lot of great volunteers, serve team, incredible. When I think about Oasis, I just think about the hundreds or thousands of people that have come to faith in Christ or that have found direction in their life and found purpose. And over the years, we've had, just great victories and great challenges. And we've been just off of Wilshire Boulevard for a long time. We were at a storefront building by Wilshire and La Brea, which is now Jack in the Box, I think. And then we were in a theater for 17 years that was near Highland, and then here in this church. But Holly and I know it was an honor that God gave us to lead and be a part of this here. And Pastor Julian and Christina are doing a great job, and we honor them as well. But I have to tell you, pastoring in LA was different. Unique people in Los Angeles. I felt like the vision that God gave me was to reach people far from God and lead them to become genuine followers in Jesus. And so we reached people that hadn't been in church or maybe had a bad experience or whatever it might be. But man, during the great times, it's fun and celebration. During the valley times, you just get back up and go, okay, I'm going to reach one more person for Jesus today and keep on going. And I remember one time a guy came up to me after church over at the theater, and he said, hey, I don't go to church much, but I really like this. I liked your speech or lecture. And he goes, do you go by Reverend or Father? I was like, Philip is good. I should have said, I'm good with Father Philip. But he said, yeah, I like how you talked because there was no BS, except he didn't use the initials. And I was like, oh, I don't think anybody's ever said that to me before. So welcome. Glad you're here. One time, I got this idea. We were meeting in a theater, and people come to Los Angeles, move from all over the United States and world to pursue entertainment industry in some way, and that's a good number of people. And so when we were in that theater, I thought, well, everybody hopes that they're successful enough to get a star on Hollywood Boulevard. Said at this theater, let's make Jesus the star. So I hired the people who did the stars on Hollywood Boulevard to do a star for us with Jesus' name in it. And we put it in the front of the theater and had a little installation ceremony. And not a whole lot of people came or heard about it. But then a rumor went out. And, bad news travels a lot faster than good news, So they said, the Chamber of Commerce is going to sue this church for copyright infringement on this star. And so that hit the news media all over. So one day, Holly and I stood in the lobby of the theater with CNN truck, Telemundo, Channel 13, a place from Germany, one from Europe and Australia. They're asking us questions about why we gave Jesus a star. I mean, it was like $1 million worth of advertising, I guess, for the church. And on the news, one guy they interviewed, they said, well, what do you think about this church giving Jesus a star on the street? And he goes, well, I think that was a pretty good idea, but if they get his hands in the cement, then I'm going to be impressed. Well, I've been in ministry almost 44 years. And we now live, for a couple of years, we live in Dallas, in the Dallas area. And I'm still a big fan of all the LA sports teams, my Dodgers, Lakers, Clippers, I'm grieving about the Mavericks losing Luka Doncic. That was a little sad. That was the only team I was really into in Dallas. But I bought some Luka shoes just last week, part of the grieving process. But actually, I've been a Clipper fan for 30 years, so I'm used to heartbreak and disappointment. So the Mavericks, I don't know if they even have enough people right now to substitute during a game or something. But anyway, so what I'm doing now is I work as a partner relations with Watoto Child Care Ministries. So the children's choir, I talk to pastors and churches and encourage them. And I serve at Shoreline City Church with Pastor Earl and Onika McClellan. And that's a powerful church there in the Dallas area. And I help mentor young leaders and young couples. And so that's, other than hanging out with my grandkids, that's what I do with my time. And, but I'm at a season in my life where people will ask me, after all the years of ministry, what's your advice? What are one or two things that you think are crucial on your journey of faith? And I like that. And somebody said, what would you tell your younger self about life and ministry? And so I decided to just call this message advice I would give to my younger self. If my younger self would pay attention, I don't know about that, but you have to think about the priority that Jesus gave. There's a story where a person came to Jesus, and it says, it's in Matthew chapter 22 and verse 36. And this man says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Now, they had over 600 laws they had to follow. And he said, "Simplify it for me, man. That's a lot of laws." Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." How do we make this kind of love a priority in our life? How do we make it real? We probably all believe and agree, loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind, loving each other, and that's very important. But it's one thing to have the belief and another thing to act it out. But there's something about the line he said, with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all your mind. And I think in human nature, we always try things out a little bit. We like to stick our toe in the water first. And he's saying the greatest is when you can do it with all your heart, all your soul. And maybe that's the challenge, is that the issues that we have inside of us that keep us from loving God or loving others fully. I just heard about a young woman who was in a rehab organization, working on some of the hurts and the addictions and everything. And she was an angry, angry girl. And the leader said, "Why is it you're so angry? Why do you drive everybody away? What do you want?" And out of her mouth came, "I want you to love me the most when I deserve it the least." And I thought, wow, what a powerful thing to say. Now that's a big ask. That's a tall order, isn't it? I mean, sometimes, if I'm honest, I have trouble loving some people at their best, And so, but don't we all want to be loved that way? We want to be loved the most when we're at our worst. And that's the way God loves us. And he wants us to be able to approach him and approach others with this love that is fully embracing. Now, when I lived here, I was driving on the famous 405 freeway, or infamous. That's the one thing I don't miss about LA. And so I was driving, and I was gonna make a lane change into the right lane. So I look over, and I underestimated how close that car was in that lane. So I started to move over, and he reminded me of how close he was by honking the horn. Now, you've probably all had one of these honks. This was not a honk, honk, look out. It's a honk, like way longer than necessary. I mean, designed to bring shame on me and my parents and everybody I've ever met. It's like, all right, sorry. But I noticed in the side view mirror that's on everybody's car, there's a little statement, a little phrase. It says, objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. And you know what I thought when I was reminded of that is that's the way it is in our life sometimes. Our past hurts and pains and struggles are closer to us than they appear. Because sometimes we bring our hurts, our disappointments, anger in our life into present circumstances. Have you ever gotten so angry over one little thing and you realize this is not really about this thing? It's about other things that I've had this anger and it just caused me to blow up. It probably deserved a reaction of a 3 and I gave it a good 9.5. And I wonder if that's not what happens when we're trying to trust God. That we've trusted people or we've trusted circumstances and it didn't work out too well. And so we're holding back some of our heart, some of our mind, some of our soul. But sometimes these past issues affect our decision-making, our emotions, and our perspective. The Apostle Paul had a young man in his life that he called his son in the faith, Timothy. And among the last letters that Apostle Paul wrote to us is in the Bible, 1st, 2nd Timothy. And it's as if he was sharing the secrets, the most important things. And in 1st Timothy, he says to him in chapter 1, verse 5, the goal of this command is love, which comes from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. Some have departed from these and have turned to meaningless talk. There are a lot of things along the way as we're following Jesus that we can get off on the side. We can talk about spiritual gifts and prayer and forgiveness, and all those things are important, and when is Jesus coming back, and many things. But he's saying, but listen, you can do those other things, but without these 3, love from a pure heart, a sound conscience, a clear conscience, a sound mind, and genuine faith, we go into, it's meaningless because we need that and as we approach God. Now, I define a good conscience, well, actually, ChatGPT defines it this way. A good conscience is one that is clear before God, free from unconfessed sin or hypocrisy. So this good conscience reflects integrity between what we believe and how we live, and we are free from those past hindrances in our life. And that's the power of the Holy Spirit. He can do that in us. And he says, goes on to, in verse 19 in that same chapter, he says, holding on to faith and a good conscience, which some have rejected and so have suffered shipwreck with regard to their faith. So it's important that these are priorities, a good conscience and a sincere faith. So here are my 3 pieces of advice that I can give in this time we have, that as I reflect, what I would tell my younger self. And the first one is, make gratitude a daily focus. Now, I know that this could sound so simplistic and maybe cliche even, but I'm not talking like act like you're happy even though you're not. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about finding a place that you can actually be grateful for something or some things, no matter what the circumstances in your life. Now, we know as followers of Jesus that when you read something in the Bible and it says to do this, then that's the will of God. But did you know in the New Testament, there's only 3 or 4 places that specifically say, this is the will of God for you. And here's one of them. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. It is the will of God that we find a way to be thankful in the middle of all circumstances. Not saying that you're thankful for every pain and every difficulty. I would be lying if I told you I was grateful for everything that happened to me. I did find a way to learn from even the dark things that happened to me, the disappointments and the setbacks. It didn't feel that way at first, but thanksgiving, if it can be with all of your heart, is life-changing. It is so powerful. Let me tell you about my first trip to Uganda. Now, over the years, I started traveling to Africa, well, earlier, but regularly for the last 16 years, and been to many countries there, but primarily Uganda. And I knew about the poverty when I was going to go there, and I knew about the orphan population because of HIV/AIDS epidemic and civil war and the clean water crisis and many things. But I didn't really know what to expect, but I came with that in my mind. But you know what I found? I found some of the most grateful and happy people that I've ever met in my life. These people had a way of finding joy in the middle of their circumstance. I thought I was coming from America to help these people out. And we did some things that helped them. But what I found is that they had a faith that was so trusting of God that even though circumstances weren't the best, they were so grateful to God for what they did have and grateful that a stranger from another country came over to say, I love you, can I help? And man, it's interesting because in the United States, we've gotten so used to the blessings and the provisions in our life, the great things that we have, and technology and advancement and medical field of the advances that have taken place. But it doesn't equal out to us being the most happy people on the planet. In fact, the opposite is true. We are right now in an emotional health crisis. It's an epidemic in our country. People that you know, people that you love, maybe some of you here today struggle with depression, anxiety, loneliness is huge, and stress and all the different things that we go through. And you would think if provisions really made people happy, we would be the happiest people. But there's a lot more to it. There's a massive connection between happiness and gratitude. I believe that our emotional and mental health affects our work relationships, our attitude, our perspective, our physical health, our thinking. And so I wanted to get healthy so that I'm not affected. And the Bible is clear that success is not what we think it is. We are warned in the scripture that life is not about possessions and power and authority and wealth and those sort of things. Not that there's anything wrong with good things in your life, but what really brings happiness and gratitude is love and generosity and kindness and patience and those things that we grow in our faith. And so the gratitude thing is important because we can get so focused on what we need to get done and what our next goal is, and we think about the lack of things that we might have that are really temporary things, and we lose sight of the important things that really matter. But gratitude changes our perspective. Gratitude can change the content of your soul. And what I said is, and my advice is to make it a daily focus. Don't just get reminded by, we all have that friend who points out stuff that we don't notice and go, oh, look at the sunset. We're like, oh yeah, that's great. Or, they pick that out. But it's like you have to be intentional yourself. One time, Holly and I were going through a tough time pastoring and just in life circumstances. I don't remember all the details, but I bought this jar it was a clear jar, and we got some of those sticky notes. And what I said is, here's what we're going to do. We're going to write down one thing we're thankful for each day and put it in the jar. And so we started doing that. And so at first you're kind of like, sometimes you think this is silly and what difference does it make? But you write it down. And what's interesting is that the jar would fill up, and then you'd go through something difficult and you start thinking about that. And then you look over at the jar and you go, you know what? There really is a lot of things to be thankful for. and maybe I can be better at communicating it to people. So a couple years back, I went to get some counseling. I've done that a few times throughout the 40 years. And we talked about, because sometimes I just struggle with anxiety. And it just kind of gets a hold of you, and you start thinking of the word. I'm like an overthinker. Is anybody in here like an overthinker? You know, Jesus said, Martha, Martha, you are worried about many things. And by the way, if you know an overthinker, don't tell them they're overthinking, okay? We know. We were thinking you probably thought we were overthinking. But we're working on this kind of stuff. And then the therapist goes, okay, here's what I want you to do as part of what we're doing, is that I want you to write down 3 things every day that you're grateful for. And just do it before you go to bed at night. It could be one word, it could be a sentence, it could be whatever you want to do. And I got a little frustrated. It's like, I know about gratitude. I was a pastor for 35 years. But then that's not the spirit that you're trying to do it in. But then you're starting to write, okay, I'm grateful for my wife, grateful for my dog Ringo, I'm grateful for my friend, and you just start writing stuff down. And then it becomes where you're starting to look for it. You know what it does? It recalibrates your brain. It adjusts your thinking and your perspective. And so I encourage you, you don't have to write down 3 things a day, but either write something down or tell somebody something or express it when you pray. But when you make thanksgiving and gratitude, it changes you. It helps heal the soul. And I think it brings clarity to discerning the will of God. I've taught this before, and if you're praying to God, God, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to take job A or job B? Don't you love it? We give God choices. And, or it could be, should I date this guy, person A, person B? And he's like, how about C? But here's the thing. If you're offered 2 things, if you could get to a place in your heart that if God said this A, I would be 100% happy. And if he says B, I will be 100% grateful. I'm 100% grateful no matter what it is. You're so much more able to hear what God has to say, because you're not going, God, now A is a really good choice. I think you noticed. And I want to be honest and pray, so I'm going to ask you for your input, but we all know probably A. But don't forget B and C. And how can you hear clearly? One time over at the theater, I was teaching on this, and by the 3rd service, I was worn out. In the 3rd service, I forgot what stories I told, and did I say this already? And I started making stuff up. But I was telling this example, and I said, so, maybe the Lord tells you got a job in Maui or Cleveland. Which one? You got to be 100% grateful no matter which. There was somebody in that service came up to me and goes, how did you know? We are here visiting, and we are on our way to Maui to evaluate a job, but the other option is Cleveland. And I was like, well, you know how to assess it now. Just be grateful for either one. The second piece of advice I would give myself is to look for unplanned moments to help others. It's hard to articulate this, but some of life's greatest impacts happen in an unplanned moment. The word serendipity refers to this phenomenon of finding something valuable or delightful when you least expect it. It almost feels random, like a detour. And I like this phrase, divine interruptions. But divine interruptions don't usually come in my life to like God tapping me on the shoulder. Excuse me, I'd like to interrupt you. It's a conversation, it's a question, it's an open door. And if you think about it, how many miracles did Jesus do that look like an interruption? He's walking along, and the woman grabs the hem of his garment. He had a plan. He was going somewhere, but Jesus was interruptible, but not distracted. And so it's the woman at the well. It's the touching the hem of his garment. It's the Good Samaritan story. He's going to Jericho. He's on his way, and he sees somebody in need. Now, you want to be wise, and you don't want to put yourself in any physical danger, but I've noticed that great things happen when you're open to somebody. That's an interesting thing about Texas. People are really friendly. And at first, I've been in LA so long, when first people were so friendly, I thought they were up to something. I was like, what do you want? It's like, how do you get to the grocery store? 10 minutes later, we're still talking about my family. And so, but it's those moments where you allow that. And it's happened to me in Uganda. It happened to me, when in 2007, we read about the clean water crisis. I didn't even know it existed. And I read in a newspaper, I just was sitting at a Starbucks, and I noticed somebody else's newspaper headline, 1.1 billion people don't have access to clean water in the world. I was like, wow, that's a lot of people. How come I don't know about that? So I came to church the next Sunday, and I said, I can't help a billion people, but we could help somebody. Why don't we build a well in sub-Saharan Africa and help a community have clean water? And so we raised some money, sent it, and people loved it so much, it's like, let's do it again. It's like, okay, let's do it again. And we did it again. And then we did another one. Then we started a nonprofit called generosity.org, and we had a run for about 10 years, and we ended up providing clean water for 850 water projects in 21 countries. We did the calculations one time, I can't remember exactly, but it was kind of like the number of people that would fill the Rose Bowl every night for a week is the number of people that we were able to get clean water to. And you know how it happened? I was looking across at somebody else's newspaper, and I was like, wow, somebody should do something. You know, there's a lot of problems out there that we can't afford to meet, but we could probably afford to help somebody with something. You know, and it's just, reach out. You don't have to go across the world to help somebody. It's the waitress or the waiter. It's the Uber driver. It's the person that you talk to, and you find something out, and you just be open to how can I help? You might be the answer to someone's prayer. One time, we had a men's Saturday prayer time. We would have those often over at the theater. And one Saturday, one of the men, this newer guy, he came up to me and said, well, I've been to your church a couple times and I like it. I was going to another church for a little bit, and how do you decide? You got any advice on me how to decide where I should go to church? And I said, well, I'm not trying to talk you out of going to another church, but if you're interested here, here's what I like to tell people. Give us a year. Give us a year, join connect groups, come to service, serve, worship God. And at the end of that year, either your faith is stronger, you have a real relationship with Jesus, you met some of the best friends, you got accustomed to the presence of God. And if not, go to another church. And he said, I think I can do that. So he started giving us a year, hanging out, volunteering. One time I said, hey, let's go to a Dodger game. We started hanging out. And that person is Julian Lowe, who's the pastor now. And it was just, a lot of people have asked me, hey, how do I get more involved? But you just kind of open to this moment. And it's so exciting to see what God can do if we will take a minute. I'll tell you one funny story here. I mean, it's funny to me, but probably 12, 13 years ago, Holly and I were on the TV show The View. No kidding. It wasn't as political back then. I didn't watch it much, but what I did see with 4 or 5 women yelling and trying to have a conversation, they invited us to come. I was kind of panicked. that might be where my anxiety started right there. I was like, how am I going to get a word in? And so I said, well, Holly's with me. She manages to get a few words in, so it'll be good. So how we got invited was they were going to do a show where the hosts were bringing somebody on the show that was either a mentor or a highly influential person in their life. And so Sherry Shepherd picked us. So when we were at that storefront over there by La Brea, she came to church. And she's come off and on over the years, but she came, she served in the children's ministry. She was a struggling actress and waitress and whatever, and serving. And so after she'd been there a little bit, she came to me and said, hey, I'm struggling because I need a car. And my debt is a mess. But I'm gonna lose my job if I can't get a car, and I'm trying to get a car and the bank won't approve it. And so I said, well, I'll write a letter to the car, the used car place. And so I wrote a letter. I'm a pastor of a church. We had like 200 people. I wasn't had any pull with anybody. It's just like, hey, I'm a pastor of this church. Sherry's a great volunteer. She comes all the time. I think you should trust her. Like that's supposed to help. It did. So, but here's what, I barely remember that. We've had a friendship over the years, but when we got the call, the producer on the phone says, now, do you know why she's asking you? And I was like, yeah, we've known her for a long time. She goes, do you remember what you did? Maybe. What did I do? You wrote a letter. And she told me about it. And I was like, oh, yeah. And it's just that one little thing opened a door and blessed her life and opened doors for her and just led to this kind of situation. So I just want to encourage you to be aware of those moments where you could make a difference in somebody's life by being available and reaching out to them. The last thing that I'll tell you, that my advice to myself and my advice to you is to realize that perseverance produces strength. Perseverance is the greatest secret to growth. And here's why. Perseverance is the quality that allows all other qualities to exist. Perseverance is the quality that allows all other qualities to flourish. You want to grow in your prayer. You want to grow in your leadership. You want to grow in your relationship. Perseverance. Philip, how did you pastor a church in LA for 35 years? Perseverance. That's the number one thing. There are a lot of great things that happen, but if I didn't persevere through difficult times, see, you persevere through the hard times so that you can celebrate in the good times. Holly and I just celebrated in January our 40th wedding anniversary. And people say, how did you stay married 40 years? Perseverance. She said therapy, but I cleaned it up a little bit. Perseverance. Yeah, there's great times. We had wonderful times. We got great kids. We got a great family. We had a lot of success, but we had a lot of struggles. And there were times where you just think, is this worth it? But you persevere because you're dedicated to the cause. You're dedicated to the marriage. And so that gave us the opportunity to have wonderful times and celebrations and great times together because we kept going there. And I want you to know, maybe you're going through discouragement. Maybe you're going through a storm right now. And I want you to know you can get through it. Don't give up. Don't quit. It's a normal part of life. Listen, you might be tempted to think like I was. Listen to this phrase. If you follow Jesus, life will be better. Isn't that true? Yes, of course it's true. But I took it to mean if I follow Jesus, I'll have less problems. But not necessarily. I will miss a few problems I would have went head on into. But following Jesus is the relationship with him. You persevere. And so I was always surprised when I go through a hard time. What's happening to me? God, I'm serving you. I'm a pastor. I love you. I did this. I did that. Why is this happening? You just persevere. it didn't cause me to give up my faith. It caused me to push in to God. So if you're going through a storm in your relationship, you're going through a storm in your finances, you're going through a storm in your faith, I want to tell you, don't give up. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Keep following him. Be grateful for the great things he's done. Help somebody else along the way. Hang in there and you'll see the blessing of God. God bless you.